You know, Francis was like my dad. He meant more to me probably than any man walking. And this shirt, I think all of us who are blacksmiths probably recognize this shirt. This is what Francis looked like to us who are blacksmiths. We probably never did see the man in a suit. And it amazes me to this day what Francis will go through to get me into a dress. I never wore a dress, but whenever I would be around Francis, the first thing he did is he would look at my hands. He could tell how much smithing I'd been doing. He would look at my hands. And then he would lean over and he would say, "Did you bring your dress?" He felt that as a blacksmith, I should be more well-rounded than just wearing jeans. And so he had me always bring my dress whenever I would see him. And so this was the second one I wore today in this memory. But, you know, some people just touch you. There are so many people in our lives that come in and out of our life, and then there are those that open doors that we did not ever even know existed. And in 1975, when I first met Frances Whitaker, I believe I was probably the only woman in America who was doing this kind of ironwork. And Frank Turley, who I'd studied with for 6 weeks, were known as 6-week Turley Wonders, those of us who've done that. He's a real leg up on the industry, first woman in his class. He takes 6 students 3 times a year, and he took me on a gamble, of course. And then he calls Frances and says, "You really got to meet her." He called Tom Bredlaw. And so my husband, who's now deceased, but he and I went around and saw Tom Bredlaw, and we got to go to Frances's shop and meet Frances. And he said, "You know, you really need to go to the 1976 Abana conference that's going to be in Carbondale, Illinois." And it was just this little handful of blacksmiths, and I think there were like maybe 100 in America doing this, and of which Frances and several others had enough sense to start an organization of blacksmiths. And he said, "You really ought to go." And so I did go, and I took some of my work there. And Francis said to me after he said, "You know, your life has work in it." And he said, "I want you to know that this is not going to be easy for you. And you may not even always believe in yourself." But he put his hands on my work and he said, "I want you to know that I will always believe in you." And I didn't even know what that meant at the time. I didn't realize the man was a master smith. I didn't know what a master smith was. I didn't know a lot about ironwork. I was a product of the 60s, a woman who painted her fingernails. I knew there were 2 kinds of screwdrivers, a straight one with that funny little thing on the end of it, you know? I was not a person who knew about it. Drill press, hammers, tongs. I knew nothing about that. I prayed for something. Prayed for something that I could do that would show that God existed in our lives and helped us and enter all of that. And Francis was part of that. And he was a man that encouraged me, and up until the very day he died, he was important to me. He would call me on the phone. I'd have a problem with something. I'd call him on the phone. I thought he was invincible. I thought he would never die. He took me around and showed me all of the wonderful work that he did here in Carmel. We spent a wonderful afternoon going through Catalina School, looking at the beautiful ironwork that was spoken about here a little bit ago. And each piece to Francis was like a child to him. He was tied to it by its proverbial apron string. You know, it was just wonderful because he saw the magic that really you can get into this work that otherwise it's just kind of dead steel. It comes off a rack, you jerk it down, you look in there and you go, "Yes, I see a mouse in there, I see a flower in there." But it really takes a person like Francis to get the mouse and the flower out of the steel. And that is what he really taught a lot of us to do. And I believe that Francis, way back there in 1976, stood up in that auditorium with the rest of us in Carbondale, Illinois, of 100 blacksmiths, and we were going, "Wow, there's not very many." And he said, "I envision 2,000 blacksmiths across the United States one of these days." You know what the rest of us did? We all left, of course. "I don't know if you could get 2,000 blacksmiths across the United States. How could you do that?" And Francis took it upon himself to create a generation of blacksmiths where before there weren't any. He wanted to talk to his peers, they were all gone. There weren't any, we didn't have very many. Of course, there were a lot of them, I mean, and we can name them off, a lot of them, Samuel Young and Carl Jennings, and many of them, but just the same, they were all old, like Francis was getting up there. And it had stopped, it was like almost dying. There needed to be a renaissance. And the man, Francis, that I hear about that was grumpy and difficult and those kinds of things, I never saw it. I never saw it. He would stop what he was doing and show me how to make the minutest thing, and then he'd look at it and he'd say, well, I think that's about right, now make 100 of those. And you'd go, okay, Francis. 100 of them, sure. But the idea was that we got done with 100 of them, you probably know how to do it. And he always said things, little sage things like, for instance, there isn't anything somebody isn't going to see. In other words, don't think that just because you put an arc weld on the back of the piece, nobody's going to see it. One of these days they'll take it off the weld there. Another thing that I remember is, take the time to do it right the first time. In other words, when you're hammering and you have to slit something and drift the hole and put the pin through, make the tools correct so that when you get it done, it's perfect. Because like you said, if you don't take the time to do it the first time, what makes you think you're going to have time to do it the second time? And he was right. And so what he did is he taught all of us who would have the opportunity to work with this man how to make beautiful iron and to do it in the same sort of discipline of the masters that he was fortunate to work with, and to do all of that beautiful work that you see out there that's actually forged, mortise and tenon, split, drifted, upset, and all of the things that only a person like Francis and those that came in front of him could show. And he took the time to actually gear down, to believe in us when we didn't maybe believe in ourselves. And gender aside, he didn't really have a real problem with gender. He had a real problem with attitude, and he didn't care if you were a woman or a man. It was, did you want to do that? And how hard did you want to do it? And he didn't care about the rest of it. If you wanted to do it, he'd feel my arms, you know. And as the years would go by, he pretty soon realized that I could do it. He would tell me I could do it, and he would notice that my hands were stronger, my attitude was stronger, my arms were stronger, my work got better. And the next thing I realized is that all of the successful blacksmiths in America, maybe not all, there are of course exceptions, but I would be willing to bet, without a doubt, that just about every single successful forge and anvil blacksmith in America has had Francis touch their life in some way. And that's really an amazing thing to be saying. But he taught thousands by we'd go to his workshops. Many of them were very fortunate to go to the Colorado Rocky Mountain School. I did not go there. As a student, I went there to teach a few times. He also wrote books. He was prolific with his work. He would put it out. He would write letters. He was a prolific writer, as Stephen, his son, can tell you. Every letter he ever wrote, it's probably in triplicate somewhere and still in his house. But he would write to us, and he would call us on the phone, and he knew where to get the answers to all kinds of things, and he made it his life's mission to show all of us who didn't know anything how to be masters of the work. And that day when I got the 24-hour call, and my children, my two daughters, they said, Mom, you gotta go. I mean, all things halted for that man. Mom, you gotta go. And I can still remember walking into that room like a sledgehammer to my heart. I knew that my friend, who I thought was gonna live forever, was at the end of his journey. I knew it. I knew it. And we all did who were there. But we never saw him in pain. It was very wonderful and peaceful. He had his hammer in his hand, and he just simply slipped into the ages. And those of us who were fortunate enough to have been a part of his life need to pick up all of those little pieces and become one of those powerful ripples. His niece said, one of the Curleys, I wish I could remember her name, said that Francis was like one of a powerful ripple, and that's what each of us who learn from Francis can become, one of the powerful ripples in his life. And I said to him one time, we were walking along the Carmel beach, and he was pointing out Point Lobos and the Catholic school and all these areas, and I said, oh, Francis, what am I going to do when you die? What am I going to do without you? And he stopped and he looked around at all of the beautiful trees and the water and everything that is beautiful here, and he just, that gentle way, you know, he looked around and he looked back at me and he said, Dorothy, he said, I'm going to be a whisper in the breeze. I'll never be gone. I'll tell you everything you need to know, and I'll be looking over your shoulder. And I hang on to that. I really hang on to that. And this hammer is a hammer. Any smith can look at this hammer, anybody else can look at this hammer too, and they can see that there are about 1 million hammer swings on this hammer. Its little nose is flattened. This is a hammer that Francis lovingly used for years and years and years and years. And he gave this hammer to his son Stephen. And Stephen gave this hammer to me. And I want you to know, and all the rest of the world to know, that when I die, I'm going to be a blacksmith all of my life too. And when I'm 90 years old or 92 like Francis was, I'm going to be making andirons. Like Stephen saw Francis make andirons, and he made candelabras for many people right up until he died. And I know that I'm going to be a blacksmith all my life, and when I die, I'm going to have this hammer in my hand too, like Francis did. And those of us who were privileged to know him will be forever changed. Thank you very much.